You did everything right. You cooked a proper meal, you portioned it out, you put the leftovers in the fridge, and tonight you're going to reheat them and feel good about not wasting food. Responsible, practical, smart, except there is a very real possibility that what you are about to put in that microwave or back on that stove is no longer the same food you cooked yesterday. Something has changed inside it, chemically, biologically, at a molecular level that you cannot see, cannot smell, and cannot taste. And when you eat it, your body is going to receive something that your digestive system, your immune system, your gut microbiome, and in some cases your nervous system were absolutely not prepared for. This is not about food that has gone bad in the obvious sense. This is not about mold or a strange smell or something that has clearly been in the fridge too long. This is about food that looks completely normal, smells completely fine, tastes exactly as you remember it, and is quietly doing damage that accumulates every single time you repeat this habit. Millions of people do this every single day. It happens in professional kitchens, it happens in school cafeterias, it happens in homes where people are genuinely trying to eat well and be responsible with their groceries. And the 5 foods at the center of this conversation are so common, so universally present in everyday kitchens that when you hear what happens to them when they are reheated, you are going to think about your refrigerator very differently from this moment forward. Stay with me, because the food sitting in your fridge right now might be a much more complex story than you ever realized. Let's begin by establishing something that most people have never been taught about food, because without this foundation, the specific dangers of reheating make no sense and can be too easily dismissed. Food is not a static object. It is a chemically dynamic system that continues to change after cooking, after cooling, after storage, and again after reheating. The proteins in your food continue to denature and restructure. The fats continue to oxidize. The carbohydrates continue to undergo molecular rearrangement. The microbial environment within the food shifts as temperature changes, create conditions that favor different populations of bacteria. And critically, certain chemical reactions that cooking either initiates or suppresses can be dramatically accelerated, reversed, or transformed by the specific thermal stress of reheating. When you cook food for the first time, you are applying heat to a raw biological system and transforming it. Proteins unfold and restructure, starches gelatinize, fats render and change their chemical composition, bacteria are killed, enzymes are denatured, flavor compounds are created through Maillard reactions and caramelization. This is all intentional, managed, and results in food that is both safe and nutritionally valuable. But when you refrigerate that food and then apply heat again, you are doing something fundamentally different. You are applying thermal stress to a system that has already been transformed once and has since been through hours of biochemical change at refrigerator temperatures. The results of this second heat application are not simply a repetition of the first cooking process. They are something new, and in some cases, something harmful. This is the framework you need to hold as we go through each of the 5 foods. Not fear, not panic, understanding. Because understanding is what allows you to make genuinely informed choices, rather than blindly following habits that may have been damaging your health for years. The first food you need to think twice about reheating is rice. And if your immediate reaction is that you reheat rice all the time and you've never had a problem, I want you to understand that the harm from improperly handled and reheated rice is not always immediately obvious, and that the population of people who experience acute illness from it represents a small fraction of those who are being affected. Here is what is happening at a microbial and chemical level that you need to know. Raw rice contains spores of a bacterium called Bacillus cereus. These spores are extraordinarily resilient. When you cook rice, you kill the vegetative bacteria, but the spores survive. As the rice cools, those spores germinate and begin to multiply rapidly, producing 2 types of toxins, one that causes vomiting and one that causes diarrhea. The critical and alarming thing about these toxins is that they are heat stable. When you reheat the rice, you kill the bacteria that produce them, but you do not destroy the toxins. They remain in the food, fully active and fully capable of making you ill, regardless of how thoroughly you reheat the rice. The risk escalates dramatically with how the rice is stored between cooking and reheating. Rice left at room temperature for more than 2 hours enters what food safety scientists call the danger zone. The temperature range between 4 and 60 degrees Celsius in which bacterial growth occurs most rapidly. In this zone, Bacillus cereus can double its population every 20 to 30 minutes. Rice left out for 4 hours can contain bacterial counts high enough to produce toxin levels that cause illness. And then refrigerating it slows but does not stop the toxin accumulation. Reheating it kills the bacteria but leaves the toxins intact. You eat it, it tastes like rice. And then hours later, your body is fighting something you had absolutely no warning about. The solution is not to avoid eating leftover rice. It is to cool rice rapidly after cooking, ideally within 1 hour, and refrigerate it immediately. Consume refrigerated rice within 1 day. Reheat it only once to a temperature that is steaming hot throughout. And never, under any circumstances, reheat rice that has been left at room temperature for hours. These are not overcautious food safety rules invented by people with nothing better to worry about. They are grounded in a specific, well-documented pattern of food poisoning that sends hundreds of thousands of people to hospitals and clinics every single year in ways that get misattributed to stomach viruses and bad luck. The second food that transforms dangerously under reheating is something almost everyone considers a health food: spinach and leafy green vegetables, particularly those cooked in dishes that are then stored and reheated. This one surprises people more than almost anything else in this conversation because spinach carries such a powerful positive health reputation that the idea of it becoming harmful feels almost contradictory, but the chemistry is unambiguous and the science is settled. Spinach is naturally very high in nitrates. This is actually one of the reasons it has been associated with cardiovascular health benefits. Dietary nitrates from vegetables are converted in the body to nitric oxide, which supports blood vessel function and blood pressure regulation. The problem begins when spinach is cooked. The heat from cooking deactivates the enzymes that would normally regulate nitrate conversion and simultaneously activates bacterial enzymes that convert nitrates to nitrites. When the cooked spinach is then cooled and stored, bacterial activity continues at refrigerator temperatures, and nitrite concentration in the food increases over time. When you then reheat the spinach, you accelerate this conversion further, and the combination of concentrated nitrites with the proteins and amino acids in the food creates conditions that favor the formation of nitrosamines, compounds that are classified as probable human carcinogens. The risk is not from eating fresh cooked spinach. It is not even from eating properly stored cooked spinach that is reheated once under appropriate conditions. The risk accumulates with repeated reheating, extended storage, and particularly with the combination of nitrate-rich vegetables, reheated together with protein-rich foods. Restaurant kitchens that prepare large batches of cooked spinach dishes and reheat them across multiple service periods are creating precisely the conditions for elevated nitrosamine formation. Home kitchens where spinach soup, creamed spinach, or cooked greens are prepared on Sunday and reheated throughout the week are doing the same thing on a smaller scale. And because the finished dish tastes completely normal and shows no signs of spoilage, there is absolutely nothing in the eating experience to signal that anything has changed. The third food is one that sits in more refrigerators than almost any other leftover, and one that carries a set of reheating risks that span multiple different mechanisms of harm simultaneously: chicken. Reheated chicken is one of the most complex and multidimensionally risky of all leftover foods, and it is worth spending significant time on because the risks are layered in ways that are not immediately obvious even to people who are aware that chicken can be dangerous. The first risk is the most well-known: incomplete reheating that leaves the interior of the chicken at temperatures insufficient to kill bacteria. Chicken is the primary vehicle for Salmonella and Campylobacter, two of the most common causes of serious bacterial food poisoning in the world. When chicken is cooked to a safe internal temperature the first time, these bacteria are killed. But during storage, the surface of the chicken can be recontaminated from the environment, from utensils, from hands, or from other foods in the refrigerator. When reheated, if the surface reaches safe temperatures but the interior doesn't, which happens far more easily than most people realize, particularly with microwave chicken, which heats unevenly and creates cold spots, bacteria survive and the risk of illness is real. But here is the risk that almost no one talks about, and it is arguably more significant for the long-term health of people who regularly reheat chicken without acute illness: the effect of reheating on chicken's protein structure and the formation of oxidized cholesterol compounds. When chicken, particularly the skin and the fatty portions, is heated, cooled, and reheated, the cholesterol molecules within the fat undergo oxidation. Oxidized cholesterol, also called oxysterols, is categorically different from regular dietary cholesterol in terms of its biological effects. While the health effects of regular dietary cholesterol remain debated, the evidence around oxidized cholesterol is considerably more alarming. Oxysterols are cytotoxic, and they damage cells, and they have been shown to damage the endothelial cells lining blood vessels, promote the formation of arterial plaques, and contribute to the kind of inflammatory cardiovascular damage that underlies heart disease. They are also more readily absorbed by the body than regular cholesterol and are associated with increased oxidative stress in arterial tissue. The degree to which oxysterols form in reheated chicken depends on the fat content, the reheating method, the temperature reached, and how many times the food has been through the heat, cool, reheat cycle. High-temperature reheating methods, like reheating in a dry pan, under a grill, or in an oven at high temperatures, produce more oxysterol formation than gentler methods. And chicken that has already been cooked at high temperatures, refrigerated, and then reheated at high temperatures again has gone through 2 cycles of oxidative stress, with cumulative oxysterol formation from each cycle. The fourth food is one that most people think of as almost infinitely versatile and safe to reheat under any circumstances: eggs. Scrambled eggs, hard-boiled eggs, egg-based dishes like frittatas and quiches. These are fixtures of meal prep culture, packed into containers on Sunday and consumed throughout the week. And while occasional reheating of eggs is unlikely to cause acute illness in most healthy people, the specific chemistry of what happens to egg proteins and egg fats under repeated thermal stress deserves serious attention that it almost never receives. Egg whites contain extraordinarily complex protein structures that undergo irreversible denaturation when cooked. When reheated, these proteins undergo further structural changes that make them progressively harder for your digestive system to break down and absorb. But far more significantly, egg yolks are rich in cholesterol and polyunsaturated fatty acids, both of which are highly susceptible to oxidative damage from heat. The lecithin in egg yolks, which is one of their most nutritionally valuable components, begins to degrade under repeated thermal stress. The cholesterol in egg yolks undergoes the same oxysterol formation we discussed with chicken, and because egg yolks have relatively high cholesterol density, the concentration of oxidized cholesterol compounds in repeatedly reheated eggs can be substantial. There is also a specific and underappreciated bacterial risk with eggs that differs from most other proteins. Eggs, particularly scrambled eggs and other preparations where the structure has been broken and the surface area increased, are an excellent growth medium for Staphylococcus aureus, a bacterium that, like Bacillus cereus, produces heat-stable toxins. If scrambled eggs or egg dishes are not cooled rapidly after cooking and are held at room temperature for any extended period, staphylococcal toxins can accumulate. Reheating kills the bacteria but leaves the toxins intact, creating a food poisoning risk that is completely invisible to any sensory evaluation of the food. The fifth food is perhaps the most psychologically difficult one to accept as potentially dangerous under reheating because it occupies such a central place in so many people's ideas of healthy eating: potatoes. Specifically, cooked potatoes that have been cooled and then reheated, and the surprising transformation they undergo at a molecular level that creates both a specific bacterial risk and a more complex metabolic issue that has profound implications for blood sugar, gut health, and long-term metabolic disease risk. The bacterial risk with cooked potatoes is related to Clostridium botulinum, the bacterium responsible for botulism, one of the most dangerous foodborne illnesses that exists. Clostridium botulinum thrives in anaerobic environments without oxygen, and produces a neurotoxin so potent that it is classified as one of the most toxic, naturally occurring substances known. Potatoes that have been baked or cooked and then wrapped in foil or stored in airtight containers create exactly the anaerobic environment that Clostridium botulinum requires. At room temperature, the bacteria can multiply and produce toxin. Refrigerating the potatoes slows this process but does not eliminate it if the conditions are right. And critically, while reheating kills the bacteria themselves, the botulinum toxin is significantly more heat resistant than most people realize. While it is inactivated at high temperatures held for sufficient time, casual reheating in a microwave or brief warming in a pan may not reliably destroy it. But beyond the acute toxicity risk, there is a metabolic story about reheated potatoes that has extraordinary significance for the enormous and growing population of people managing blood sugar issues, insulin resistance, prediabetes, and metabolic syndrome. When potatoes are cooked and then cooled, their starch undergoes a process called retrogradation. The starch molecules reorganize into a new crystalline structure called resistant starch. Resistant starch is not digested in the small intestine. It passes to the large intestine, where it feeds beneficial gut bacteria and produces short-chain fatty acids with anti-inflammatory effects. In this form, cold-cooked potato starch is actually substantially better for metabolic health than freshly cooked potato starch because it causes a much smaller blood sugar spike and feeds the microbiome. However, when you reheat the potato, the resistant starch partially converts back to digestible starch. The metabolic benefit of cooling is partially reversed, and you are left with a food that spikes blood sugar more than the cold version, but less than the freshly cooked version, the specific degree depending on how thoroughly it is reheated and by what method. For people who are metabolically healthy, this is a minor consideration. For the hundreds of millions of people worldwide who are in various stages of insulin resistance and metabolic dysregulation, the difference between repeatedly eating reheated potatoes and finding alternative approaches is the difference between inadvertently aggravating a metabolic condition and supporting it. Now let's zoom out from the individual foods and talk about what is happening at a systemic level when a person regularly reheats these foods, because the cumulative picture is more significant than any single incident of eating reheated rice or reheated chicken. The average person who regularly eats leftovers, and in busy modern life this describes the majority of adults, may be reheating multiple foods from this list multiple times per week across years and decades of daily eating. Each individual meal may cause no perceptible harm. The body handles the toxins, manages the oxidized compounds, compensates for the metabolic irregularities, and recovers. But the cumulative burden of repeated exposure to heat-stable bacterial toxins, oxidized cholesterol compounds, nitrosamines, and digestive stress from damaged proteins adds up. It adds up in the gut lining, which experiences repeated low-grade inflammatory stress. It adds up in the arterial walls, which accumulate oxysterol-driven endothelial damage. It adds up in the liver, which processes and detoxifies the oxidized compounds your digestive system absorbs. And it adds up in the microbiome, which is shaped by every single meal you eat, including the quality of the molecular compounds those meals deliver. This is not an argument for never eating leftovers. Leftovers, handled correctly, are not only safe, but are a genuinely practical and environmentally responsible approach to eating. This is an argument for understanding that the way you handle, store, and reheat food is not a trivial matter. It is a set of daily micro-decisions that, compounded across thousands of meals, have a meaningful cumulative effect on your health in ways that are completely invisible in any individual instance, but become significant over time. The principles that emerge from understanding these 5 foods apply broadly to how you think about all reheated food. Cool cooked food rapidly, eat for within 1 to 2 hours of cooking. Store it in shallow, open containers initially to allow heat to escape quickly before sealing. Refrigerate promptly and consume within 1 to 2 days for most protein-rich foods. Reheat to genuinely hot temperatures throughout, not just until the surface is warm. Avoid reheating the same food more than once. And pay particular attention to the combination of protein-rich foods with nitrate-rich vegetables, to rice and egg dishes that have spent any time at room temperature, and to the cumulative frequency with which reheated chicken and egg-based meals appear in your weekly eating pattern. Your kitchen is either working for your health or against it, and most of the factors that determine which of those is true are not dramatic or obvious. They are quiet, daily, habitual decisions about food you have already cooked, already stored, and are about to eat again. The science exists. The understanding is available. The question is simply whether you apply it, starting now, in the daily reality of your own kitchen and your own meals and your own long-term health. So here's the question I want you to think carefully about and answer honestly in the comments below, because your experience matters and your honesty might genuinely help someone else who is reading these responses tonight. Which one of these 5 foods do you reheat most regularly? And after hearing what you just heard, what is the one change you are going to make to the way you handle it, starting with your very next meal? Write it below. Your answer might be the most important thing someone else reads today.